5th, 2024. I'd like to bring to order our Historic Landmarks meeting for Deschutes County. And I think our first item on here after the call to order is any public comments. And we don't have anyone online besides Lori, is that right?
Correct. And I think we're waiting for Commissioner Schmidling. I sent him an email.
Oh, good.
He should be zooming in any moment.
Okay.
We just left.
It's because the IT guy was standing right there.
Does that mean we lost them too in the recording?
No, the Zoom is.
Oh.
Okay.
Commissioner Christopher, I hope you're sufficiently amused by this.
Mhm. Is this
Our apologies.
I don't think that was
Yeah.
an affirmed thing. There was a time when the room was haunted.
Hmm.
Oh, ghost stories. There was a time when the room was haunted.
Oh.
Somebody kicked something under their desk and it made the monitors go on and off. So if any of you were just kicking cords recreationally.
True.
This is the appropriate commission for a hunt.
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I guess you can proceed and we'll
Okay.
hope that Commissioner Schmidling.
Hopefully we can join. Yeah, that sounds good. I think we have enough people here to go ahead with our approval of the meeting minutes from May 6th.
I was here.
Yes.
But it didn't show that I was in attendance.
Oh, you weren't, yeah,
Yeah.
you're missing off of the attendance on
missing.
that. That's Friday.
I will make a
Okay.
note of
Missing.
that. Thank you.
I wasn't missing.
That's a good catch. I didn't catch that one. Would anyone like to approve the meeting minutes for May 6th?
So move.
I'll second the motion.
With that one correction for Eli? All right. Our next item is, actually, first of our action items tonight is our commissioners' subcommittees. And Tanya's going to talk to us a little bit about our areas of interest and which ones we've expressed interest in. I think there was like 4 or 5 different categories.
That's correct. Thank you. For the record, Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner, Deschutes County Community Development. So yes, at the last meeting that I was not here, the HLC decided to, given that the meetings happen fairly infrequently and you want to do stuff, to form subcommittees based on topics of interest. And those were determined to be, can you hear me okay? Is it too echoey? It sounds strange. Is it okay? Okay. Cultural resource work, wildfire and preservation issues, Camp Abbott, and general public awareness. And I received input from some of you about your priorities. Thank you for that. Others of you I know are not able to commit to additional subcommittees, and that's 100% fine. The way it landed, we're going to have a little discussion. It was only fairly obvious about the wildfire committee because two commissioners had that as their number 1. So I'm going to consider that one a done deal if that's okay with you all. So the wildfire and preservation issues subcommittee would be Commissioner Ashley and Commissioner Cyphers. So we'll check that one off. So for the rest of them, we can kind of do this however you'd like. In terms of general public awareness, kind of 3 of you put this as a higher priority. We'd like to only have 2 people per committee, per subcommittee because of quorum issues. Excuse me. And for any of the commissioners who did not weigh in, if you do want to be part of this, any of these, please make that known now so we can just have a discussion of who would like to be in on what. And I'll just quickly go through all of them and then we can just sort of open up the floor. So for public awareness, right now we have 3 interested people. So we need to narrow that down to 2. Camp Abbott, we had Commissioner Christopher she's interested, and then we'd like to add 1 other person. And if that doesn't naturally, we don't want to force anyone into a subcommittee. So if nobody's interested in that, a few of you put it kind of lower on your list, but if you're not really, really into it, that's fine as well. So we don't want to force these issues on you. So I'll just let you discuss that amongst yourselves. And cultural resources, we have Commissioner Hudson and +1. Maybe that could be whoever doesn't do the public awareness, but it's kind of up to you all. So I'll let you all fight it out amongst yourselves. I don't want to dictate, but so we're looking for just 2 total for each one. So I'll open the floor to you, to the commission.
And I did respond late, before I think you put this list together, Tanya. This is Rachel Stemich. I would be open to filling any of the roles that are needed, I think. Whichever one looks like we're short on, I think I could do any of them. But I think only one of the committees.
Because we didn't have perfect attendance at the last meeting. The other thing would be is if there was questions about what, the category, or the context in which.
Right. Yeah, does anyone have any questions or want to kind of finesse what these things are about?
Yeah, I would like to know what the cultural resource, I mean, that's a pretty broad topic.
Yes, it is. I'll turn that over to.
I think we were actually, a lot of that was in the context of what the possible outcomes from the travel consultation process you're gonna talk about later.
Mhm.
And I think the other part too is just having people to approach if something in that category comes up, just kind of designated amongst the commissioners.
Mhm.
Oh, a member of the public wants to talk to some people about cultural resource issues. These 2 are the 2 who are kind of tasked to it. I think that
Just, oh, sorry, Commissioner Hudson, could you just bring your mic a little closer?
I'm sorry.
And again, I'd like to reiterate that, or just state that these subcommittees are yours. So they can be as active or not active. They can be, whatever shape they take, they can evolve, they can change, so it's very fluid. I don't want to pin people into things, so it can evolve.
I don't think my mic is on. I think this one might work. Hello. Okay, there we go. I am okay since it looks like we have 3 for the general public awareness. I can just stick to wildfire because that was more of my priority if the other 2 want to stay in that one. I was wondering as well, as an ex officio member, if I can potentially participate because I don't really count, right? So where does that play into it? Could somebody else, if they want to be a 3 in a group, would I? Yeah,
Be
I
able
was
to
just
kind of
curious.
third.
Yeah.
I think it would probably, and we don't have our legal counsel here, but I think for the purposes of these subcommittees, it would be all right. Do you have thoughts?
Your planning manager, Will Groves. Thank you, Chair, Commissioners. We have no idea. I think if we can keep you in packs of 2, we're for sure going to be safe.
We could have
But
alternate.
we could, what's that?
We could maybe have an alternate, if
Mm.
one.
Yeah, we can follow up with legal counsel before the next meeting, but if for at least at this time, if we could put these committees into sets of 2, that'd be easiest.
Mhm. Yeah, and there's always the potential too, Lily, is you may not always be an ex officio. So, and depending on how long these committees go for, it could extend out a ways.
Thank you.
Thank you. I believe Commissioner Christopher has her hand raised.
Pardon me.
Thank you. I think I misunderstood the assignment. I'm sorry, Tanya, I thought you said choose 2, so I only chose 2. But I'm happy to serve on whichever subcommittees are needed. Those 2 are my areas of interest. And I would put, I'd put wildfire last. I thought there would be a lot of interest in that. So I thought I'll step aside. And so then the 3rd one would be the cultural resource work, and then wildfires last. So I don't know if that helps with where you're going to place us, but those are my feelings.
Thank you.
I would add, I'd be happy to help out Commissioner Christopher with the Camp Abbott stuff. It kind of falls in my background and skill sets
Great.
and know that Deschutes Land Trust real well. So
Okay, so that means we have Camp Abbott filled.
I could
Commissioner
help out with the cultural resources. This is Rachel.
Christopher, okay. This is-
I'm genuinely interested in it. Yeah, I'm kind of like you. I don't know exactly. I mean, it is, we make it with the topics that we want, so we get to define that. So.
So we're left with the public awareness, and I'm sorry, so something just happened on that and I forgot. Sorry. We were gonna narrow it down to two.
Just the two.
Oh, right, Commissioner Cyphers, you wanted to stick with wildfire, was that correct?
Mhm.
Sorry, I was just
No, you're fine. Thank you.
blacked out for a moment there.
Mhm.
Okay, so public awareness issues would be Commissioner Ashley and Commissioner Christopher.
Okay.
So I'll run down the list just so everyone can be sure, because I was just very jumbled. So wildfire and preservation issues, we have Commissioners Ashley and Cyphers. General public awareness issues, we have Commissioner Ashley and Christopher. Camp Abbott, we have Commissioner Christopher and Commissioner Hudson. And cultural resources, Commissioner Hudson and Commissioner Stemage.
You got
Sound
it?
good?
Yeah.
And again, if anything comes up, these are very fluid. So what can happen now? You probably have each other's email addresses from my meeting invites. So you can coordinate amongst yourselves. Just keep it, in your groups of two. And it's what you make of it. If you want to meet every other day, you can do that. If you want to meet once between now and the next meeting, that's totally fine too. If you want to do it email, lunch, happy hour, you can do it however you'd like. And then the general idea is that at the next meeting, which will be early November, we'll just do little reports. And sometimes maybe we do a similar thing with our bicycle and pedestrian advisory committee. Some months there's nothing to talk about, and that's fine. Some months you're busy. Some months you have a lot that you read this really cool article, whatever it is. So it's just free form, and whatever the commissioners are interested in doing would be great. So.
Hey.
Any other discussion on that?
When it comes to, since it is groups of two, like if it's email and stuff, we still have record of that if necessary, right? Or does it matter because it's only between the two commissioners and not back to the
Because
planners
it's not a
or-
quorum, it's just,
it's
okay, yeah.
okay. Right, I just want to make sure.
I appreciate that. It's always a little funky with how that works.
Mhm.
It's always best to err on the side of caution with any of the quorum or public meeting issues.
Mhm.
And just a note, although this hasn't come up, you would be acting in your official capacity during that time. So, don't discuss your mother's maiden names or your first pet or your social security number in those emails, because it would be potentially discoverable if somebody thought there was malfeasance in the way that your subcommittees were meeting. Seems really unlikely, but just.
And I think just as an aside, we possibly discussed this in the introductory meeting that we had with our new commissioners. If you want to set up a separate email, if you find that better, some people do that for some of their committees. It would just be, like TanyaHLC@gmail.com. It can't be a county email, but sometimes people have found that helpful. For instance, in our planning commission, you don't have to, but if you feel the need to do that, you can do that, and just always let me know so I have the proper communication emails. Excellent. Right.
Excellent. Okay. Our next action item is the Goal 5 Culture Areas Rulemaking Updates.
Me again.
Mhm.
I'll turn this over to the new subcommittee. I'm just kidding, but so this is just meant to be, we've discussed this throughout our last couple of meetings. The Department of Land Conservation and Development, otherwise known as DLCD, is embarking on a rulemaking process to address cultural areas. I'm going to just do an overview of the process, and I gave you sort of a quick download of the basics of the proposed rules in the memo. I'm not going to go into that into detail. I'm also not an expert on it. I'm kind of the middleman here, and this is where we're going to rely on, if they so choose, the subcommittee to dig in deeper if they want or not. I just want to make the HLC aware of this process that is occurring to address cultural areas. And Commissioner Harding Jones, you might have some things to add to here, no pressure, but you might have some thoughts. I thought this would be of interest to you as well. And so the way we anticipate this happening is, the HLC does not necessarily need to take any sort of official action or anything like that now, but eventually, once these rules are adopted, probably the beginning of next year, the end of this year, that might entail some work for the HLC to adopt that into our historic preservation code. And usually that's fairly straightforward because if it's rulemaking, you don't really have much leeway in how that language translates into our local code. Sometimes there's a little, but that would be a project for the HLC in the coming year. So right now it's in development. I provided the website. The website is really helpful. I found they have all of kind of their meeting minutes and their presentation, the various drafts. There's a lot there. I found the webinar, the presentation that I attached to the packet, that was just for me, coming into this fairly cold, it was pretty helpful in just the overview of the purpose of the amendments and why they're doing this, kind of what the structure of these proposed rules are. So if you haven't reviewed that, I would recommend that. Some highlights of just the timeline. They've had a few rules advisory committees already, 4 of them exactly. The next important date is on September 1st. This is when the draft rules are going to be released to the public, and that happens in partner at the same time with official public notice. So it's posted with the Secretary of State for that process. They're saying, hey, this is out there. This is where it opens up the public record. So that means that people can start to provide comments and testimony. The first hearing, which is going to be at a meeting of the Lands Conservation and Development Commission, will be on September 26th and 27th. That's their meeting. I'm not sure if that means both of those days or just at that meeting that takes place during those 2 days. The public comment period ends on October 15th. And then they're going to have another Rules Advisory Committee meeting in early October to discuss sort of how that's all going, if they want to have any additional comments. And then the second hearing is planned to be on December 5th and 6th with LCDC. So that's their proposed schedule. Let's see. So when those draft rules come out on September 1st, I will send those out to you or a link to them so you can all read them. You can see them in sort of draft stage now, but they're redlined and there's a lot of stuff going on. So that's kind of the next exciting date that I will keep you apprised of. So in general, I'm going to just provide a really basic overview. These proposed rules are basically taking the idea of archaeological sites and cultural resources and landscapes and knitting them into the existing Goal 5 framework. So Goal 5 is the whole system, and feel free to weigh in if I'm misspeaking, Will, of just protection of all kinds of resources, whether it's surface mines, wildlife, historic resources, wetlands, all of those things that need protection. They are addressed in what's called Goal 5. And there's a series of rules in the Oregon Administrative Rules that dictate exactly how these things are identified, how their value is sort of assessed in relation to other activities or land uses, and what the protections of those resources are. So this would be a new little subchapter. It would fall right after the Historic Resources chapter in OAR. So it's kind of a big deal. It's a very long set of notes and rules, but basically it's creating a lot of new definitions. These are things that have not really existed in rule in a cohesive way, relating to cultural areas and archaeological sites. So for instance, going to be, forgive me, I just lost my place here. Oh, they're defining things like archaeological object, archaeological site, cultural areas protection, significant landscape feature, what defines a qualified archaeologist and that type of thing. And then it outlines the process for how you would inventory these things. So before you can protect something, you have to identify it and inventory it. It establishes how you do that. It provides guidance on identifying culturally significant landscape features, which is not a thing that exists in current goal 5. And then what's, I think, the most important thing to us as planners, there's a lot of notice involved now and how we're going to communicate with the tribes about these resources that they've identified or others have identified, and just making everyone more aware of these rules and processes. I think that's the thing that's going to be the most significant and potential change to the way we do things here. It also clarifies the relationship of this new chapter to the existing goal 5 processes. For instance, if things overlap with, say, what's called a scenic area or a wetlands, what takes precedence over what in terms of the rules? It's a very kind of long series of rules of how you identify these resources and the protection. So one section of the rules, section 2, identifies like how you prioritize those overlaps. Section 3 of the code will reference the Oregon Archaeological Records Remote Access database, which I have never been, this is something new to me, and Commissioner Herding-Jones, you probably know a lot more about this than I do, but it's the database, the secret database of archaeological resources that is checked against, but it's not distributed. Obviously, the main concern with archaeological resources is people with nefarious intentions, potentially looting or damaging resources. So this is a state database, and this rule in theory will identify kind of how local governments could potentially use those without, broadcasting it to the universe. It's a interesting balancing act, and I don't really know how it's going to work because I'm not familiar with that yet. Sections 4 talks about the local inventory of culturally significant landscape features. This just shows how you would, again, inventory things. So it's very similar. We had a project a while ago with a wildlife inventory. And so you're kind of declaring, you're looking at this area, you can decide sort of what area it is, whether it's the whole county or a smaller area, and you're looking to see within that area what items of significance might be in there. And there's ways to do that. And this is showing how local jurisdictions can actually do that and how you would do that, just the procedural aspects of how you would notify the state and put all that into play. And then section 5 is the protection of significant archaeological sites. And this involves a decent amount of notice, what I was speaking of before. It requires local governments to include information about archaeological site protection in land use applications and authorizations. So my understanding, the way it's written right now, is in pretty much any application, there's going to be some sort of boilerplate language that says, hey, you can't mess with these things. And I'm unclear if that's going to be on every single land use application or just the ones that have been identified as in areas of significance. So it'll have some sort of disclaimer to warn people and tell them that these programs exist to protect these resources. It'll also have notification to tribes. This is a big one of certain development proposals for quasi-judicial applications. So this means applications that pertain to a particular property. The owner of this property wants to do this, build this addition to their house, build this new business, etc. There would be potential notice to the tribes on that, which is something we've been working on in general, I believe, but this will be a statutory requirement. Right now, what we in long-range planning work on is primarily legislative amendments, so not quasi-judicial. So we're working on zoning text amendments, larger scale policy type things. We're working on improving our notices to the tribes for those as well, but that is not addressed in this section here. Yeah, and let's see. And another item of significance with that rule is that it would potentially include conditions of approval to minimize impacts on those resources. And, that's potentially a pretty big deal. Those conditions of approval could be things like just, requiring a survey to happen, so it's documented that there's some significant resource there. Something bigger, if it's for a larger development, requiring a developer to cluster their development. We do that for wildlife often. You're saying instead of spreading the houses across this entire lot, you want to cluster them here to preserve the resources, whether that's wildlife or archaeological resources that are over in this corner. that can be a pretty significant lift. And I think it's really interesting. So there could be conditions of approval, associated with these types of, notice and quasi-judicial, decisions. Let's see what else. That's kind of the biggest thing. There's protection for landscape areas of cultural significance as well. Let's see. Protection of landscape areas of cultural importance. This would be, a lot of that pertains to cities if they're expanding their UGB, but also would expand to quasi-judicial reviews on rural lands. Again, notification to tribes and potential conditions of approval. So a lot of these are very similar. They're just to different types of resources. Section 8 is interesting in that it's kind of like, if you don't want to do any of this stuff the way we've prescribed it, you can develop your own program to have a government to government consultation. So we can have if we have a relationship with the tribe, for example, we can have a regular direct kind of engagement process. And I'm not exactly sure what that would look like, but that's an alternative. So if you wanted to kind of do it your own way, they're providing that option, which to me is very interesting because usually Goal 5 stuff is very, very prescribed. So that's in there as well. And Section 9 is about the applicability of just when it applies. It's sort of procedural stuff. So that's like a really kind of garbled summary of what these rules are going to be, and they're in progress. If you look at the draft language, there's a lot of little comments that people have made, and it really gets into like a great amount of detail. And I would look to people with more expertise than I have to kind of distill that and say if they think that those are meaningful changes or not. But I think on the whole, this is an opportunity that, doesn't exist in our code right now. So it is very interesting to see where this will land. Any questions or comments?
I have a comment. and
Yes, please.
These are based entirely on this document.
Yes.
I have not gone in and looked at any of the details, but to me, this raises a lot of questions that I will have to do some research. So is the county planning on commenting on these? Because I see this has the potential to really affect your personnel, your process. I mean, for instance, Section 3, right now, you have to be qualified archaeologist to get permission to review SHPO's database. Now, either they're going to allow some kind of exception for county, or you're going to have to hire a qualified archaeologist to do that. And that's going to affect your budget. So I see all kinds of questions here, and I think it may be to the county's advantage to comment.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point. And I know that in one of the documents, they have to create a fiscal impact statement that looks at things like that. Like, what would the cost to local governments be? Whether that's staff time or, just mailing notice that can cost a lot of money, just stuff like that. And the money doesn't come from the sky. I wish it did. But yeah, I think that's a really important consideration. And I don't know the answers yet. Will, do you have thoughts about the county making comments?
Yeah, certainly. Thank you. So, of course, I took a look at the rules. They vary in how well refined they are. Some of them are really rudimentary. Some of them end halfway through the sentence saying, we'll need to figure this out. So there's they're really still in a very draft phase here. When we thought about commenting, as we discussed previously, and I'll refresh you, is that, we've got a difficulty with the timelines that we're up against in terms of this. As Tanya mentioned, we're in a public comment period that has opened up in September, and then and there'll be hearings on September 26th and 27th, and then by October 15th, the public comment period ends. And so our next HLC meeting is scheduled for
First week of November.
the first week of November. So as this body in the way that we'd like to engage, it seems like the rules are pretty rudimentary, and we haven't teed it up sufficiently for you today to make any sort of formal recommendation. So as we think about how to engage, there's a couple different opportunities here. Certainly, the county has an interest as an adjudicator of land use matters to make sure that this is implemented well, exactly to the commissioner's point. The second thing is how to meaningfully allow you to engage with this. I mean, certainly during the open record period, you're welcome to send comments saying, hey, I'm a member of the HLC, but I'm participating as an individual today. I've read your rules. I've got concerns with section 3. Here's how. To the extent that we wanted to speak as the HLC to the rulemaking committee, we would do that through the board. And so we're going to talk to you a little bit today and see what your comfort level is with an approach where the extent as you review these rules, if you've got things that you believe that the county should speak with the county's voice to the rulemaking committee, we would look to you in the kind of coming weeks to take a look at this, send an email to Tanya and say, individually, I've read this, I've got a concern. Or, this is a thing we think should be added or omitted or changed. Tanya would consolidate those remarks and then come forward to the board and say, we've received a number of, here's what's happening. Here's why you don't have an official voted on recommendation from the HLC because of the timing of this. Here's some concerns of individual HLC members. Board, would you like to speak with the voice of Deschutes County and carry this to the rulemaking committee that there's, that your outreach body for historic concerns has issues, thoughts about this. And we could do a little bit of pen pal with this and show you kind of a copy of, you said X, we heard Y, everybody basically good with that? All right, let's go. I don't know if you're going to be able to engage. I looked at the rules. If you're going to either want to or be able to engage the rules at this point, some of them are pretty rudimentary, but we're going to, and Tanya will discuss with you what that looks like. To the commissioner's point, certainly staff will be looking at this from an institutional interest, but we would be looking to you to the extent you have the time between meetings to give us any reflections you have, and to the extent that you'd like to see those. So you can certainly, as I mentioned at the outset, carry those forward as individuals. Again, if you'd like to see Deschutes County on letterhead say something, we would do that through Tanya, through the board.
And even if it's not your individual concern, I mean, maybe, what Commissioner Harding-Jones just brought up, this could be a significant resource allocation for staff. That might not be your individual concern as a human, but you're elevating it to us as, something to be flagged as the institution. So that would be helpful as well. We can relay that to the board and run that up the flagpole as you see fit and proceed that way. And and if the subcommittee wants to do that as well, they can do it. You can do it as individuals, but basically I can be the conduit for any comments in any form, however specific or general.
I think so in my 9 to 5, I'm a statewide organization and on a rack, and part of the issues with the rulemaking process is right sizing it to the different county conditions. And we've been down there in Fort Rock Basin quite a bit talking about it in a different context, but you can't, it's some of the oldest known archaeological sites in the hemisphere right there. So they've got that on one end of the spectrum, and then you have other areas where there's a lower level concern. I think what I would be looking for is ways we can reinforce the staff concerns at this point as to things which will be practicable and process while still trying to get to the overarching goals of this effort, which are good. Any insights that you guys could share as this goes along would be good. The other question I would have is, this does create like a path A, path B. And both also require a pretty heavy load of work, right? There's either...
You mean with the custom versus the...
Yeah, you're either going to be doing inventorying in community meetings right on the one side to get to the cultural resource areas, or you're going to be probably... I can't see the consultative process being anything besides a in-depth relationship with the tribes, right? And so that's the other thing I think I'd like to better understand is, how do you guys foresee that body of work going, if assuming this gets passed more or less in its current state? What does that mean? And what does that also mean for HLC integration in that process too?
Those are really good points. Thank you.
I had a couple of questions. This is Rachel Stemich. Two actually, on the section 1 on definitions, we're talking about archaeological objects, sites. and then you have, cultural areas and then landscape features, which are way more generic, it seems like to me. And obviously some of those archaeological, I could assume would be linked to the tribes, but I mean, sometimes we have landscape areas or whatever that has, like you said, it's like if it's more, maybe it's, I don't know, the city park in the middle of Sisters, or, it's we do actually have a couple of listed sites in Deschutes County that are on the list that I think kind of fall into this category, but they're not, I wouldn't say they're not tribal. So I'm assuming that those definitions will go into like what types of sites, I guess, fall into those categories.
I mean, right now I can say that the draft language for what they're calling potentially significant landscape feature, they're saying, gosh, my eyes are getting so bad. Means a natural or culturally modified landscape feature that is integral to a tribe's history, legends, traditions, and stories, traditionally used for wayfinding, traditionally used for gathering first foods and materials, integral to ongoing tribal cultural practices, traditional trails, and sites on which events occurred that are important to the history of a culturally identified group.
Interesting.
So it leans pretty heavy
Yeah.
to the tribe, but that last bit, the history of a culturally identified group.
Mm-hmm.
What does that mean?
Yeah.
That means, for instance, that town site in Northeast Oregon is a logging town. I've seen it on PBS quite often.
Right.
But it had a lot of Black families living there, and there's nothing left of the town, but it's still a traditional cultural property in those descendants' mind. That would qualify.
I see.
Mhm.
Yeah, there's Chinese sites.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
Those would be another one. I'm not sure how many of those we have in the county, but yeah, I mean, I think my curiosity then is, all right, well, that is still tribal consultative, but at the end of the day, it's commission legislation that's going to be coming out, right? To clarify what those designated areas are, and what that public comment process and review process do we foresee, coming out of that?
Right. I guess that kind of leads to the second question is with that, when an inventory is done of these, or like when those sites are designated, it's like who's doing the designation? Or is it literally like an inventory, like what we've done for some of our other historic resource surveys, things like that? I mean, they probably haven't defined exactly how they're going to do those inventories either, but that too is a very intensive and costly process too.
That was one of my questions as well, because it's one thing, again, when we do wildlife, it's not the deer nominating themselves, it's the county, or in consultation with the biologist who's a subject matter expert. But for historic preservation, when it's a building, it has to be the property owner, they have to have consent. So how does that work is it coming from the tribes always? Are they submitting the application fee, all of that stuff? I would imagine that's the way it would be. I mean, I think it would be similar, and I'd have to delve further into this. The county can't make somebody do a designation. We can elbow them and say, hey, this is an offer you can't refuse. It's going to be great. You should do it, but we cannot do it on their behalf. It's the property owner. And if that's the owner of a landscape, it gets a little squishy.
Yeah, I mean, that's my concern, right? Because I can foresee a process where the tribes are either by definition or direct identification, right? Creating something for us to cross-check against. But at the end of the day, it looks like they're looking for overlays. And overlays are going to indicate private property interests and potentially restrictions associated with that. And so what does that look like? And also, we're talking about at least 3 tribes potentially having interests in this area. And how do we solidify and unify potentially different perspectives on those landscapes based on those different tribal interests as well?
You mentioned overlays, Mark. I always think of that like from a zoning perspective, but it's probably not what you meant.
Well, they have resource areas.
Oh,
right?
okay.
And
Yeah,
so that to my mind means an overlay.
Mhm.
It could mean a very straightforward overlay, or it could be kind of a definition in a vague area kind of thing. But But yeah, I think there's probably gonna be a lot of clarification, even post rulemaking, in terms of programmatically from DLCD in terms of how this works.
Mhm.
Now, my question also would be is, does DLCD have designated guinea pigs in that context too? Do they have some case study examples of some counties working with the tribes where they want to demonstrate this first or not? Or are they gonna be looking?
We usually are the first in many things. Yeah, I mean, if they, like a model, I mean, it would be an example that turns into sort of model code, which becomes the rulemaking, but how are they doing it? What are these meetings like? What is that relationship? And it'll differ so much from county to county, you know? It's a lot.
Yeah, also, like I said, I do work with Lake County quite a bit where they have a single person on the planning staff. And I do kind of wonder about the differentiate and a high load of archaeological and cultural resource areas and stuff. So I do wonder as to whether or not this is planned in the context of some resource availability being made at the state level too. And whether or
Right.
not that might be something that we could pursue, either available to the counties or to the tribes kind of thing.
Right. Any other thoughts? It's a lot to digest. It's just a lot.
Basically, they're going from almost no mention to this entire section to account for it, so it seems like it's long overdue.
Yes, yeah. I'm just scrolling through to see if there's anything that I neglected to mention of interest.
Do I remember correctly, there is some requirements in the conditional use process for some of this stuff? When they're-
Or for historic, well, I believe if there's for locally significant historic resources, yes, yeah, 100%. That's our goal 5 list of,
Right.
you know, you can't mess with things, you can't alter, or you would have to go through the HLC, which the HLC hasn't done in quite some time. You know, if people want to modify their building or even demolish it, we've had a few people poking around about demolishing some acknowledged goal 5 historic buildings. They haven't come to fruition, but yeah, there is a very established process in state rule and our local code. So I would imagine it would be fairly similar, and it would involve a hearing and, you know, presenting findings, and it's just that initial identification, I think that is the kind of the new aspect.
And just because a site is identified or indicated on the inventory doesn't mean it's a listed resource.
Correct,
You
right,
have
you
to
can
follow
have
the
those
process.
reconnaissance level surveys saying, oh, all this stuff is really important, but only one of them kind of rises to someone actually submitted the application to get it acknowledged as a goal 5 resource. Yeah. That's a good point. So,
If I could jump in.
yeah,
I appreciate your patience with the looseness of this portion of the project. When you have a chance to take a look at the draft rules, the annotations to them, you'll see that we're providing about as much clarity as exists on the underlying material at this time.
Mhm.
We'd like to bring you something more structured and say, hey, do you like A or B? Let's do something. And it's not there yet. So do take a look, and I appreciate you thinking about it.
They're actually farther down the road than the rack I'm on, and we have the same deadline. So, yeah.
there you go.
Mhm.
And in the future, and I know the timing will be not perfect, but we can potentially invite the DLCD representative who has been spearheading this. Her name is Amanda Punton, and she does a lot of goal 5 stuff. She knows so much. And she could potentially come, just depending on availability, and speak about kind of where this is. It would be after the public record closes, but before the last hearing. To me, you know, when we do our own county processes, the record usually stays open throughout all the hearings. So I'm a little, I don't quite know how that works. Maybe it's just a refinement for that last hearing. It's a little different than our processes, but if that would be interesting to the commission, we can try to work that out, and she could speak. You could really get it from the people who are developing this and living it much more than me.
I think my question would be is how valuable is it to you kind of thing? in terms of, I mean, you guys have access to the representatives. I think for my purposes and as the cultural resource subcommittee, I'd probably want to take a deeper look at what they have available for interpretation as it comes out before we necessarily ask Amanda to come down here, but
Yeah, well, she would come, yeah, she wouldn't come until the next meeting, so that wouldn't be in
Right.
November.
Or maybe Zoom, could be a Zoom meeting.
Yes, yes. Yeah, so I think our recommendation is for whoever is interested to look at that website, just peruse it. If you have significant comments or questions you'd like us to sort of elevate, please do so to me. And we can go from there. Depending on the level of specificity, we'll figure out the best way to proceed with that. Whether to share it with the group in some way first, or then go to the board, or, there's a million ways we can do it. And we're happy to do that.
Have you had any conversation with the other HLCs? See if what their feel is on this?
No,
And or Redmond?
no, we haven't. We will.
I would guess the county is going to have the bigger area of concern over this
I
particular.
agree.
Well, I'm just thinking of all the growth going on and
Yeah. Well, especially the UGB kind of
Yes,
stuff.
exactly.
Yeah,
UGB
yeah.
expansion.
so
Mhm.
you've got archaeology sites, I know, that are being destroyed as we speak, because of the development. So these towns will be potentially affected by these rulemaking changes.
I will reach out to both of them and see what their awareness is about this and how they've been tracking it.
Mhm.
Tanya, when would you want comments from us at the very latest? During that comment period?
Question. If the public comment period ends in mid-October, we'd want to have time to go to the board. Well, the rules aren't even coming out until the 1st, so I would say the first 2 weeks of September, September 15th-ish, if you
Yep.
need an extra day or two, so we can work that out, but yeah, I would say mid-September would be great.
We just want to give you enough time to compile.
I appreciate that. Yeah, and it takes a little while for us to get in front of the board if we do
Mhm.
that.
Yeah, I'm taking a look at the calendar. If the HLC could provide any comments or concerns they wanted to raise to staff's attention by September 13th. So
Okay.
that'll give
Okay.
you most of 2 weeks to take a look at it. That would give us plenty of time to reach out to DLCD, try to get some refinements on those questions, and still have time to get back to the board if we wanted to speak with the voice of Deschutes County to the rulemaking committee.
So Rachel and I have assigned ourselves to this topic. But in terms of the commissioner's desire to comment and us potentially be able to fit that into any commentary, they would just email you.
Yeah, and I can,
Yep.
I can assemble all that together and sort of vet it. And if there's any conflicts, I can bring it to you all through a blind copy. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you should, if there were significant comments received from you as individuals to staff, I think what you would anticipate is kind of a draft memo, say, in response to what
Yeah.
we heard from you, we're going to move forward to the board. These are the concerns that were identified.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Okay.
Excellent.
Lori, did you have any comments?
No, I'm listening. Remember, I'm new and it's a lot. So, yeah, I want to go to the website. I want to learn more about it. So I would say no.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thank you for the summary, Tanya. That is a lot to digest.
Mm-hmm.
Very interesting. Do we move on to our next topic? Unless there's other comments? So we're going to talk a little bit, Tanya's going to talk some more about our CLG grant update.
Yes. Once again, I remain Tanya Saltzman, Senior Planner. This is just our usual CLG grant update. So we are, and again, all of these tasks were developed prior to many of you being on the commission. So you probably have less attachment than you will for their next round, but I'm going to update you regardless. So things are moving. The grant closes on August 31st, which is very soon. everything's moving along. So the City of Sisters, which is the big chunk of our grant, they are working on a report to talk about building hardening of historic buildings. So related to the wildfire issues, they gave us a draft report, and we showed that to our state historic preservation office, who had some significant edits of just asking to be a little bit more specific in their recommendations, and maybe have some illustrations, that type of thing. So they are working on that right now. And they will have that to us by the end of the grant period, but they're chugging along with their consultant, and moving forward. The Dial upgrade, which is an upgrade to our software, our web software, where you can look up properties, and the goal was to have the downtown Redmond Historic District, which is a National Register district, identified on that map. It's currently with IT. I have some hesitation on whether that is going to be completed by IT in the time allocated. But if not, it's just a matter of they will still be able to do it and complete that task. It just might not end up being part of this grant. And we weren't asking for specific funds for that. That was part of the match. So if they do it a little bit later, it's still going to happen. It's just there's a lot of different groups who work on it, which I just learned. There's kind of the GIS people and the Dial people, and there's just a lot of complicated things, but the actual work is not a huge heavy lift. So we're navigating that mini bureaucracy. It will get done. It might not be integrated as part of the grant, but we have more than enough staff time hours to cover that balance. So it's nothing significant. At the last meeting, we discussed a mailer to historic properties, just to alert them of the existence of the Historic Preservation Code, let them know, remind them that their property is a historic property, remind them of the story map. That was a great suggestion. So that is going to probably go out next week. It was a little bit delayed, but that will be going out. And so we will be concluding that grant very soon. And then next week, and I didn't add this in the memo, but as part of being a certified local government, this is a designation that is bestowed upon communities that, they meet a few criteria. They have an HLC, they have a historic preservation code, they meet regularly, et cetera, et cetera. Every once in a while, every 4 years, we have a check-in with the State Historic Preservation Office just to make sure we're still doing all that stuff, to just prove that we are still good on our CLG status. We talk through any issues with our representative, who is Curry Gill. She's fantastic at the state. So Will and I are going to be doing that with them on August 16th. So next Friday, we'll be meeting with her and just reviewing what's been going on with the HLC. And she's aware of sort of the ups and downs of it went a little bit dormant and then now we're back. So I think she's been tracking that, and she's going to be prepared to sort of offer any advice or help or assistance or critique about how we run things. And so that's a valuable thing. I've never gone through that before. Last one that happened it was a different planner in charge of as the staff liaison. So it should be interesting. I don't think Will's done it either. So it's all new to us, but it should be a good check-in with the state because they're a great resource for us. And then we'll start thinking about our next CLG grant. And that's when it gets fun, because you'll have some time, on your feet as the HLC in this iteration, and that won't be due until February, but this gives you ample time to think about kind of what you're interested in. And maybe some of this will have to do with the Goal 5 rulemaking. Some of it might be completely different. Maybe it's a refresh of the website a little bit or what have you. We'll start brainstorming on that soon, because I know there's a lot that could potentially be done. So something to look forward to. But for now, we're going to be settling up the end of this grant, filing all of our kind of final reports and requests for reimbursement and all of that stuff, and should be wrapped up by the end of the month. And we'll give you a full update and provide all those deliverables to you. We'll share all of those with you at the next meeting once they're complete.
And then you mentioned next year we'd start the kind of brainstorming in the next cycle.
Probably next meeting.
We think in November?
Yeah, I mean, since we don't meet very often.
Yeah.
Usually the application is due in February, and I forget if it's the beginning or the end.
Yeah,
of
you'd
February.
want
So,
to discuss it before then.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And in the past, we've had a special meeting or two to just talk about that, to really kind of hone in on what what we want to do. And we can always do that. So yeah, we can start thinking about it now if you want. And I'll give a refresher to all the commissioners about kind of what's eligible, what kind of stuff you can do with this grant, what kind of stuff you cannot do with this grant. Because it is a little bit narrow, but there's a lot of options for us.
And I feel like in the past, we've had some years have been more challenging and narrow down the list and
Yeah.
and we've got plenty of ideas. It's just, yeah, picking the ones that are of most urgency, I guess, or need achievable. There you go.
Yeah, it's and usually they're about the maximum amount has been around $15,000.
Mhm.
It's not huge amount of money. It's
These days.
bigger than zero, which is great. That is the budget of the HLC. So, and we do a in-kind, one-to-one match, which is usually comprised of staff time. So that's just kind of us doing our thing. But, we're not purchasing buildings or anything like that. But it's small stuff, but those are incremental things that can really help the commission kind of advance its mission. So that is my CLG grant update. Does anyone have any questions or comments?
No, I do a lot of grant reporting and I appreciate that, Tom.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for that, Tanya. Next item is our staff and commissioner comments. And I don't know if Will or Tanya have any.
I can give a brief update. So of course, one of the big projects that we do of the year is the update of the comprehensive plan.
Mhm.
And Board of County Commissioners has made it through their final scheduled hearing to take a look at those changes that happened today. And so staff will be bringing back a red line version to implement those changes that they recommended and get fingers crossed, a blessing that for a final approval and proceeding towards an ordinance associated with that. So a multi-year process coming to culmination. And lots of good changes in there. I think some of them then impact kind of the work of this committee, as well as lots of helpful things, updating our plan, that was over 10 years old at this point.
Mm.
In terms of things, yes, please. Oh,
Go ahead. I'm
further something there.
thinking ahead. So my apologies.
Oh, I think that's of the work that we're doing right now. I think that's the most relevant to this commission. I'm available for questions if you have any.
Okay. Thank you, Will.
Thank you.
I could give you a brief synopsis of how well Preservation Month
I was just gonna
went.
ask that. Yes.
Because we met at the beginning of May and Preservation Month was the whole month, and even the last event ended June 1st, in fact. But I missed a few of the early the early events. I don't know if anyone else was able to attend many of them that were on the calendar of events that the Deschutes Historic Museum had on the website, but that came together really well. The flyer was put together by one of the Redmond City Commissioners, who has a great eye for graphic design, which is great. So that went well. I think we all did the best we could with getting the word out, social media, stuff like that. So it's some of the first events, so a kickoff event that they had in downtown Redmond. I missed that one, but there's quite a few tours that happened. Different organizations that put those on. I think City of Sisters had quite a number of those. Deschutes Historic Museum, obviously they do a fair number of walking tours every month anyway, so it's just they're heavy within the month of May. And then there was quite a number of presentations. I went to a couple of them that were very well attended, including the Archaeology Roadshow, which was on June 1st, and that was awesome. Yeah, it was really great attendance and lots of really fantastic booths. They had a lot of representation from the tribes actually were there. So that is an awesome event to wrap things up with. So I think we had a pretty good overall, it was a pretty good turnout. I haven't checked in with a lot of the volunteers besides the Historic Museum, but I think it came together pretty pretty fast there at the end, but it felt pretty organized despite us kind of feeling like we were
Last minute.
rushing into it. So. Yeah, that's my update. Any other comments from staff or commissioners? We're all good? All right,
So,
well. Is that Lori?
no, I just said, I think so. It's been summer.
Yeah. Yeah. And this is it for summer. Next time we'll meet would be in November, right? The first Monday.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
That's I only looked it up. I'm returning from an international vacation, so I may or may not be here. If I am, or if I can check in by Zoom, I definitely will.
It's like it's November 4th.
4th, yeah, that's the first Monday.
Okay.
Great.
It will be smoke-free by then.
Yes,
Hope so.
we know no snow yet, but yeah, no smoke either. All right. With that, I'd like to adjourn our August 8th or August 5th meeting. So thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
I don't know how my